Ambassador Zeftai walked through the empty halls of the human embassy on Nexus Prime. His forearms moved slowly as he touched the walls where human artwork once hung. The silence felt heavy around him. 3 months ago, this place had been full of life. Human diplomats had rushed through these corridors. Scientists had worked late into the night. Children had played in the family quarters. Now there was nothing. The humans had left without warning. One day they were there, working alongside the galaxy's greatest minds. The next day, they were gone. Every human in the embassy had packed their things and departed on the same night. They had cleaned everything. They had left no mess behind. They had even watered the plants. One last time, Zeftai stopped at what used to be Ambassador Sarah Chen's office. The room was spotless. The desk was empty. Even the coffee maker had been removed. Sarah had been a good diplomat. She had always been polite during meetings. She had never raised her voice, even when other species made fun of human customs. Now her office felt like a tomb. The Veltar ambassador pulled out his communication device. He tried calling Earth for the 100th time. The same message played back. This frequency is no longer in service. Please update your contact information. But there was no new contact information. The humans had simply vanished from galactic society. Walking to the embassy's main conference room, Zeftai remembered the last council meeting with human representatives. It had been about trade routes through human space. The Corvani had wanted to use human colonies as refueling stations. They had offered to pay, but barely enough to cover costs. Sarah had asked for fair compensation. The council had laughed. "You should be grateful we even use your primitive facilities," Chancellor Mordoon had said. The other species had agreed. Humans were the youngest race in the galaxy. They had only joined the council 200 years ago. What did they know about fair prices? Sarah had not argued. She had simply nodded and said, "We understand your position." 2 weeks later, every human was gone. At first, the council had celebrated. The Silic Confederacy had thrown parties. The Zeth Kree had made jokes about the children finally going home. The Corvani had claimed that now the real adults could make proper decisions. Everyone agreed that humans had been too pushy for such a young species. They had always wanted equal votes despite being primitive. They had insisted on being involved in every major decision. Now the galaxy could run smoothly without their interference. But things had started going wrong almost immediately. The trade routes that humans had patrolled were now full of pirates. The Veltar cargo ships that had once traveled safely through human-protected space were being robbed every week. When Zeftai had asked his security chief about it, the answer had been simple. The humans used to chase away the pirates. Now there is nobody there. "We can send our own ships," Zeftai had said. "Our ships are not fast enough." His security chief had replied. Human patrol ships were built differently. They could catch pirates that our vessels could never reach. It was the same story everywhere. The Zeth Kree quantum communication networks had started failing. These networks connected every major world in the galaxy. They allowed instant communication across thousands of light years. But they needed constant maintenance. The Zeth Kree had always been proud of their quantum technology. They had never mentioned that humans did most of the repair work. "Our engineers designed the systems," the Zeth Kree Council representative had explained during an emergency meeting. "But humans have been maintaining them for decades. They understood the practical problems better than our designers did. So fix them yourselves," the Silic ambassador had said. How hard can it be? That had been 6 weeks ago. The networks were still failing. The Silic Confederacy was having their own problems. Their biodome colonies were starting to break down. These domes provided perfect environments for Silic citizens on hostile worlds. They had always been the pride of Silic engineering, but now the atmospheric processors were malfunctioning. The air was becoming poisonous. Entire colonies were being evacuated. "We need to contact the original manufacturers," the Silic engineers had said. "We are the original manufacturers," their leaders had replied. "No," the engineers had explained patiently. "We designed the biodomes. But humans built the atmospheric processors. We just told them what we wanted. They figured out how to make it work." Zeftai had learned about an even bigger problem during a classified briefing last week. The early warning systems that watched the dark space beyond the galaxy had gone silent. These systems were supposed to detect threats from outside the galaxy. They had been humanity's pet project. Other species had thought it was a waste of time and money. Nothing ever came from the empty space between galaxies. But humans had insisted on building the monitoring stations anyway. Let them play with their toys, the council had decided. It keeps them busy. Now those toys were offline. The quantum relays that connected them to the galaxy's communication grid had stopped working. The automated distress beacons were silent. When survey ships had tried to reach the outer monitoring stations, they had found the jump gate coordinates encrypted with human security codes. Can we break the encryption? Zeftai had asked the intelligence briefer. We are trying, the Corvani technician had said. But human encryption is unusual. It does not follow standard galactic protocols. It will take months to crack. Maybe years. What were they watching for out there anyway? Another council member had asked. Unknown, the briefer had admitted. The humans never shared their sensor data. They just said they were monitoring potential threats. We assumed they were being paranoid. Now everyone was starting to wonder if human paranoia had actually been human wisdom. Zeftai reached the embassy's exit. He turned for one last look at the empty building. On the wall next to the door was a small plaque that had been left behind. It was written in human English. To our galactic neighbors, we hope you find the peace you were looking for. The ambassador read it several times before he understood what it meant. The humans had not left in anger. They had left because they finally understood how the rest of the galaxy saw them. They had been tolerated, not welcomed. They had been used, not respected. They had been treated like useful servants, not equal partners. And now the galaxy was learning what it meant to live without servants, who had been doing jobs nobody else wanted to do. 6 months had passed since humanity's quiet departure, and the galaxy was beginning to understand the true cost of their absence. Captain Velnari of the Silic medical transport ship Times Healing Dawn Times watched her cargo hold's biocontainment systems flash red warning lights. The vaccines she was carrying to the outer colonies were spoiling. The refrigeration units were failing one by one. These same units had worked perfectly for 20 years. Now they were breaking down faster than her engineers could fix them. Captain, her chief engineer called over the intercom. We have found the problem. Velnari hurried to the engine room. Engineer Corson was holding a small component that looked melted. Around him, 3 other refrigeration units sat in pieces. The molecular stabilizers are burning out, Corson explained. They are not designed correctly for long-term use. What do you mean? Velnari asked. These stabilizers have been working for decades. That is what I thought too, Corson said. But I checked the maintenance records. Humans have been replacing these stabilizers every 6 months. They never told us the parts were temporary. We thought they were permanent. Velnari felt cold despite the warm engine room. Where did the humans get the replacement parts? They made them, Corson said quietly, in their factories. Using their techniques. The stabilizers look simple, but they require very exact manufacturing. Our factories cannot make them correctly. The medical transport was not alone in its problems. Across Silic space, similar failures were happening everywhere. Food processors were breaking down. Water purification systems were failing. Even the gravity generators on orbital stations were starting to malfunction. All of these systems had been working fine for years. All of them had been quietly maintained by human technicians. On the planet Silix Prime, the capital world of the Silic Confederacy, President Morkala received daily reports of infrastructure failures. The biodome colonies were the worst affected. These artificial environments allowed Silic citizens to live on worlds that would otherwise kill them. Now the domes were becoming death traps. Colony 7 has been evacuated, her aide reported. The atmospheric processors failed completely. The air became toxic within hours. What about the backup systems? President Morkala asked. The backups failed first, the aide explained. Our engineers say the backup systems were more complex than the primary ones. They needed constant fine-tuning. Without human technicians, nobody knew how to adjust them properly. President Morkala walked to her office window and looked out at the capital city. Even here, problems were obvious. Streetlights were flickering because the power grid management systems were malfunctioning. Traffic control was becoming chaotic, because the automated systems needed updates that only human programmers had known how to install. "How many colonies have we lost so far?" she asked. 17 have been evacuated, her aide said. Another 31 are having serious problems. Our engineers estimate that half of all our colonies will be uninhabitable within a year. And how many of these colonies can we support here on the homeworld? The aide was quiet for a long moment. Maybe 10%. Our population centers cannot handle that many refugees. It is armated. The Silic Confederacy was not the only government in crisis. The Veltar hegemony was losing cargo ships to pirates at an alarming rate. Their military ships were too slow to catch the raiders. The pirates had learned that human patrol ships were gone. Now they operated freely in areas that had been safe for generations. Admiral Zethkol of the Veltar fleet stood in his command center, watching red dots mark the locations of recent attacks. The pattern was clear. Pirates were hitting every major trade route that had once been protected by human patrols. "We need to increase our security presence," his tactical officer suggested. "With what ships?" Admiral Zethkol replied. "Our fastest vessels can barely match the speed of human patrol ships from 30 years ago. The pirates are using newer technology than we have." "Where do they get such advanced ships?" the tactical officer asked. Admiral Zethkol pointed to a star map. "Look at the pattern of attacks. They are coming from the neutral zone, the area between our territory and the old human border colonies. But there is nothing in the neutral zone except empty systems." "That is what we thought," the admiral said. "But humans had mining operations there. We assumed they were gathering common metals. Now I think they were mining rare elements that we did not even know existed." The admiral was correct. Human mining operations had been extracting materials that other species considered worthless. These materials were essential for building the most advanced FTL drives and quantum processors. Without access to human-refined rare elements, the galaxy's technology was starting to fall behind. The most serious problem was becoming clear to the Corvani, the oldest and most advanced species in the galaxy. Their quantum communication networks were failing at an increasing rate. These networks allowed instant communication across the entire galaxy. Without them, governing a space-spanning civilization became impossible. Chancellor Morden stood in the Corvani High Council chamber, receiving reports from their best engineers. "The quantum entanglement generators are losing coherence," Chief Engineer Yargoth explained. "The alignment processes require adjustments every few days. But the adjustment calculations are extremely complex." "Surely our computers can handle the calculations," Chancellor Morden said. "The calculations require intuitive leaps that our logical systems cannot make," Yargoth admitted. Human engineers used something they called educated guessing to solve problems that pure mathematics could not handle. "That sounds primitive," another council member commented. "Perhaps," Yargoth said, "but it worked. Our networks have been stable for 2 centuries because humans were making thousands of small adjustments that prevented major failures." Chancellor Mordoon felt very old suddenly. The Corvani had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had always prided themselves on being the most logical and advanced species. Now they were learning that their greatest achievements had only been possible because of help from the species they had considered primitive. "Can we contact Earth directly?" he asked. "Perhaps we can negotiate for technical support." "We have been trying," the communications officer reported. "But humans have changed all their diplomatic frequencies. They are not answering any calls. Our embassy ships cannot even approach Earth's solar system. They have automated defense platforms that deny all landing requests." "What do the defense platforms say exactly?" "They broadcast a simple message: access denied. Please update your authorization codes." But they do not tell us how to get new authorization codes. While the galaxy's governments struggled with infrastructure failures, private businesses were discovering their own problems. The Zeth Cree Corporation, which manufactured most of the galaxy's consumer electronics, found their production lines shutting down. Factory manager Kelthos stared at silent assembly lines that had been running continuously for 50 years. The robotic systems that built quantum processors had simply stopped working. "The programming is corrupted," his technical team reported. "The robots are receiving conflicting instructions." "How is that possible?" Kelthos asked. "These systems have been stable for decades. The base programming was written by humans," a technician explained. But they also installed regular updates to handle new situations. Without those updates, the systems are trying to follow outdated instructions for modern problems. Can we write our own updates? We have been trying for 3 months. But human programming methods are very different from ours. They use something called adaptive logic that changes based on circumstances. Our logical systems cannot replicate that flexibility. The factory that had once produced 1 million devices per day was now producing nothing. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Supply chains that had worked smoothly for generations were breaking down. Transportation systems were failing. Communication networks were becoming unreliable. The galaxy's economy, which had grown for centuries, was beginning to collapse. And still, there was no word from humanity. Their former colonies had gone silent. Their trading posts had closed. Their diplomatic channels were dead. It was as if an entire species had simply chosen to disappear from galactic civilization. In the empty human embassy on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Zeftai continued his daily visits. He walked through the silent halls, hoping to find some clue about where the humans had gone, or why they had left. But the building remained as clean and empty as the day they had departed. On his desk, he kept a growing stack of reports about infrastructure failures, economic problems, and system breakdowns. Every day, the stack grew larger. Every day, the galaxy's dependence on human technology became more obvious. But still, the Council refused to admit they had made a mistake. 1 year had passed since humanity's departure, and what had started as inconvenience had become disaster. Fleet Admiral Tarvek of the Galactic Defense Force watched in horror as the early warning test failed catastrophically. The massive display screen in the command center showed red error messages where green status lights should have been. The Galactic Defense Network, which protected every major world in the galaxy, had just collapsed completely. "Report," Admiral Tarvek ordered, trying to keep his voice calm. "Sir, the quantum entanglement communicators are not responding," his chief technician said. "The entire backbone of the defense network has gone offline. That is impossible. The network has worked perfectly for 300 years. Yes, sir. But we have discovered something troubling. The quantum entanglement communicators were all manufactured by human companies. They require specific rare isotopes to function properly." Admiral Tarvek felt his heart skip a beat. "What kind of rare isotopes?" Synthetic elements that only exist in certain star types. The humans developed special mining techniques to extract them from stellar coronas. No other species has ever learned how to harvest these materials safely." The Admiral stared at the dead defense grid. Without the quantum communicators, military fleets across the galaxy could not coordinate their movements. If an attack came from outside the galaxy, the defense forces would be blind and scattered. "How long would it take to replace the communicators with our own technology?" he asked. The technician consulted his data pad. "Our best estimate is 15 years, maybe 20. We would need to completely redesign the network from scratch. 20 years. Admiral Tarvek had commanded galactic defenses for 30 years. He had always believed that the defense network was the greatest achievement of galactic cooperation. Now he was learning that it had only worked because of technology that the Council had never bothered to understand. Far from the military command center, Dr. Yelena of the Corvani Science Institute was making an even more disturbing discovery. The deep space monitoring arrays that watched the dark space between galaxies had detected something massive moving toward their galaxy. "The object is artificial," she reported to the emergency council session. "It is approximately 2,000 kilometers long and 500 kilometers wide. Its energy signature suggests advanced technology. Could it be human?" Chancellor Mordun asked hopefully. "No," Dr. Yelena said. "The signatures are completely unknown. Also, the object is coming from the direction of the Andromeda Galaxy, not from human space." "What do you think it is?" Dr. Yelena hesitated before answering. "Based on the energy patterns and movement speed, we believe it is some kind of construction vessel. It appears to be harvesting materials from empty star systems as it moves." "Harvesting materials for what purpose?" "Unknown. We cannot get detailed readings because our long-range sensors are not powerful enough." The humans had much more advanced detection equipment, but those sensors were integrated with their monitoring stations. The council members looked uncomfortable. The human monitoring stations in dark space had been offline for a year. When engineering teams had tried to reach them, they had found the jump gate coordinates locked with human security codes that would take decades to break. "Can we send ships to investigate this object directly?" asked the Veltar representative. "We have tried," Admiral Tarvek reported. "But there is a problem. The route to the galaxy's edge passes through quantum storm fields. Human scout ships had special navigation systems that allowed them to traverse these storms safely. Our ships cannot get through." "What made human ships different?" Chancellor Mordun asked. "We are not sure," the Admiral admitted. "Human engineers always claimed their navigation systems were just improved versions of our own technology. But our ships that try to enter the storm fields suffer complete system failures within hours." Dr. Yelena pulled up another display showing energy readings from the approaching object. "There is something else," she said. "We are detecting similar signatures from 3 other directions. There appear to be multiple large objects moving toward our galaxy from different approach vectors." The room fell silent. 4 massive unknown objects approaching from different directions could only mean one thing. This was a coordinated action by some external force. "How long until they reach our territory?" asked President Morkala of the Silic Confederacy. "At current speeds, approximately 8 months, Dr. Yelena replied. 8 months to prepare for an unknown threat. With a defense network that no longer worked, and monitoring systems that had been offline for a year." While the Council debated emergency measures, Ambassador Zeftai was making his own disturbing discovery in the abandoned human embassy. He had been searching through old files, trying to find any information about human activities in dark space. Most of the data had been wiped clean, but he had found some overlooked documents in a forgotten storage archive. The files contained shipping manifests for supplies sent to the outer monitoring stations. The quantities were massive. Food for thousands of personnel, military-grade weapons and equipment, construction materials for permanent installations. The humans had not been running simple monitoring posts. They had been building fortresses. Why would they need so many weapons to watch empty space? Zeftai wondered aloud. He found his answer in a partially corrupted communication log. The file contained fragments of messages between Earth and the outer stations. Most of the content was missing, but a few phrases remained clear. "Contact with Scout Group 7. Neutralized before signal transmission. Maintain radio silence. Council must not know." The implications were terrifying. The humans had not been watching empty space. They had been fighting something in empty space. For decades, they had been engaged in secret battles against enemies that the rest of the galaxy knew nothing about. And now those guardians were gone. The galaxy's economic problems had also reached a breaking point. The Zeth-Kree manufacturing centers had shut down completely. Without human-made components, they could not produce the basic electronics that every other species depended on. Cargo ships sat in docks because their navigation systems needed repairs that only human technicians had known how to perform. Worse, the rare element shortage was becoming critical. Several species were running out of fuel for their FTL drives. The special isotopes that powered quantum processors were nearly exhausted. Mining operations had been shut down because the extraction equipment required constant maintenance with human-designed spare parts. President Morkala received a report that made her blood run cold. 30% of our colonies have been evacuated, her aide reported. Another 40% are barely functional. We estimate that our total population capacity has decreased by 70%. "Where are the refugees going?" she asked. "That is the problem," her aide said quietly. "Every species is having the same issues. There is nowhere for refugees to go. The other governments are struggling to support their own populations." The Veltar hegemony was in even worse condition. Pirate attacks had increased by 3,000%. Trade ships were being robbed so frequently that many companies had stopped shipping entirely. Some sectors of Veltar space had become completely lawless. "We are losing control of our own territory," Admiral Zethkol reported to his government. "The pirates are better armed and faster than our security forces. They seem to know exactly where to attack for maximum impact." "How is that possible?" his superior asked. "We think they are using former human equipment," the admiral explained. "Human patrol ships that were abandoned when the humans left. The pirates have figured out how to operate them. I thought human technology was primitive." "So did we," Admiral Zethkol said grimly. "We were wrong. As the galaxy fell apart, desperate attempts to contact humanity became more frequent. Every species tried to reach Earth through different channels. They sent diplomatic messages, trade offers, and eventually direct pleas for help. All received the same response: automated messages stating that the communication frequencies were no longer in service. Some governments sent ships directly to human space. These vessels found the former human colonies protected by defensive systems that politely but firmly denied all access. The automated guardians would transmit a simple message: access restricted. Please contact your local human embassy for authorization. But there were no longer any human embassies. It was as if humanity had pulled up a wall around their territory and decided to ignore the rest of the galaxy completely. Chancellor Mordun called an emergency session of the full Galactic Council. Representatives from every major species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was meeting to discuss their own potential extinction. We face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history, the Chancellor began. Our defense networks have failed. Unknown forces approach our galaxy. Our economies are collapsing. And the one species that might help us solve these problems has chosen to isolate themselves completely. The Silic representative stood up. This is humanity's fault, she declared. If they had not abandoned us, we would not be in this situation. They abandoned us because we treated them poorly. The Veltar representative replied. We used their services but never gave them proper respect. That is irrelevant now. The Zethkri representative interrupted. The question is, what we do next? Chancellor Mordun looked around the assembly hall. For 10,000 years, this room had been the center of galactic civilization. Now it felt like a tomb. We have two choices, he said finally. We can continue to pretend that we do not need human help and face destruction with our pride intact. Or we can swallow that pride and beg the humans to forgive us. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours. In the end, the vote was unanimous. They would go to Earth and ask for forgiveness. 18 months after humanity's departure, the first Devourer Harvester ship entered the outer rim systems of the galaxy, and the true scope of the crisis became clear. Dr. Yelena watched the readings from her instruments with growing horror. The massive vessel was not just moving through space, it was systematically destroying everything in its path. The Kepler 442 system, which had contained a small mining colony, was being consumed. Planets, asteroids, even the star itself, was being harvested for materials. How many beings lived in that system? Chancellor Mordun asked during the emergency briefing. Approximately 50,000. Dr. Yelena replied quietly. Were lived. The system is now empty space. The readings showed the truth that no one wanted to accept. The massive ship was a construction vessel, but not in any way they had imagined. It was converting entire star systems into raw materials, building dozens of smaller ships from the harvested matter. What had been one huge threat was becoming a fleet of threats. How fast is the construction process? Admiral Tarvak asked. Each star system provides enough material for approximately 20 smaller vessels, Dr. Yelena said. Based on current speed, the single harvester will become a fleet of 500 ships within 6 months. And there are 4 of these harvesters approaching from different directions? Yes, but our updated scans show there may be more. The quantum storms that block our sensors appear to be hiding additional contacts. Chancellor Mordun felt older than his 800 years. Do we have any idea what these beings want? Dr. Yelena hesitated before answering. Based on their behavior, we believe they want to harvest our entire galaxy. Every planet, every star, every trace of matter and energy. They appear to be a nomadic species that consumes galaxies to build new ships and support their population. The council chamber fell silent. The idea was too vast and terrible to comprehend easily. These beings did not want to conquer the galaxy or rule it. They wanted to eat it completely. Surely our ancient defense protocols will activate, suggested the Corvani military representative. The first galactic civilizations built safeguards against exactly this type of threat. Chancellor Mordun activated the archive displays that showed the galaxy's oldest defense systems. What they revealed made the crisis even worse. The ancient defense protocols failed 3,000 years ago, he announced. According to our deepest archives, the outer detection grid was compromised by an initial scout wave from these same entities. Since then, the protocols have been non-functional. Then how has the galaxy survived for 3,000 years? Demanded President Morkala. The answer came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Zeftai had been quietly researching human activities for months. Now he stood and activated a presentation that shocked everyone in the room. The humans have been protecting us, he said simply. For the past 2 centuries, they have been fighting a secret war against scout ships from this extragalactic swarm. The presentation showed evidence that Zeftai had gathered from dozens of sources. Shipping records from human colonies, military production reports, communication logs from deep space stations. When assembled together, they told an incredible story. Every human colony on the galactic rim was actually a military outpost, Zeftai explained. They were disguised as mining operations and research stations, but their real purpose was to detect and destroy scout ships before they could signal the main swarm. That is impossible, the Silic representative objected. We inspected human facilities regularly. We saw mining equipment and research laboratories. Yes, Zeftai agreed. But look at these production records. The humans were mining rare isotopes that have only one practical use: building weapons powerful enough to destroy ships with quantum shielding. Their research laboratories were developing stealth technology and early warning systems. The evidence was overwhelming. Human cargo ships had been heavily armed patrol vessels. Human research projects had been weapons development programs. Human mining operations had been fortress construction sites. For 2 centuries, while the rest of the galaxy had treated them as primitive newcomers, humans had been fighting an invisible war to protect everyone. How many scout ships did they destroy? Admiral Tarvek asked. Zeftai consulted his data. Based on ammunition consumption records and battle damage reports, we estimate approximately 1,500 enemy contacts over 200 years. The humans prevented 1,500 separate attempts by the swarm to locate our galaxy. And we never knew? The humans made sure we never knew. Every engagement was classified. Every victory was hidden. They did not want to cause panic or reveal the threat until they were certain they could handle it. Dr. Yelena was studying the tactical reports. This explains the quantum storms around the galaxy's edge, she realized. They are not natural phenomena. The humans created them as a defensive barrier. The storms disrupt long-range sensors and communication signals, so the barriers that prevent us from investigating the outer rim were designed to prevent scout ships from signaling back to the main swarm, Dr. Yelena confirmed. The humans turned our galaxy into a fortress, and we never realized it. Chancellor Mordoon felt sick. Why did they not tell us? Why did they let us think they were primitive? Zeftai activated the final part of his presentation. It was a recorded message from the human archives, dated just before their departure. The image showed a human military officer in a uniform none of them recognized. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Command. The recording began. If you are watching this message, it means our secret guardianship has been discovered. By now, you probably understand what we have been protecting you from. The recording continued. We kept this war secret because we believed you were not ready to accept the truth. Every time we tried to warn the Council about external threats, you dismissed our concerns as human paranoia. You told us we were too aggressive, too militaristic, too focused on imaginary enemies. Admiral Chen's image looked tired. We decided it was better to fight alone than to cause panic. We hoped to defeat the scout waves permanently before the main swarm arrived. We were wrong. The main swarm has found us. 4 harvester fleets are approaching the galaxy from different vectors. Our models suggest that at least 12 more harvesters are hidden beyond our sensor range. We estimate the total invasion force at approximately 20 capital ships and 5,000 support vessels. The recording paused, and Admiral Chen seemed to be struggling with her next words. The Council made their position clear in our final trade negotiations. You consider us useful servants, not equal partners. You have made it obvious that you view human contributions as primitive and expendable. Very well. We accept your judgment. The watch is ended. Prove that you can protect yourselves without the help of barbarians. The recording ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. How long ago was this message recorded? Chancellor Mordoon asked quietly. 6 months before the human departure, Zeftai replied. They had known. The humans had known about the invasion 6 months before they left. They had prepared their defenses, gathered their fleets, and withdrawn to their own territory. They had left the rest of the galaxy to face the consequences of centuries of arrogance and disrespect. President Morkala was the first to speak. How many beings will die because of our pride? The answer came from Dr. Yelana's updated casualty projections. If the harvesters continue at their current pace, they will consume the entire galaxy within 5 years. Total estimated deaths, 700 billion sentient beings. 700 billion lives. The weight of that number settled over the Council like a physical force. Every major species in the galaxy faced complete extinction, not because they lacked the technology to defend themselves, but because they had driven away the people who had been defending them for generations. What are the humans doing now? Asked the Veltar representative. Are they building defenses in their own territory? Zeftai activated his final display. It showed long-range sensor readings from the edge of human space. What they revealed was both terrifying and impressive. Human space is no longer recognizable, he reported. Every system has been converted into a fortress. The number of military vessels under construction suggests they are preparing for a war that will determine the survival of all organic life in this galaxy. Will they win? Chancellor Mordoon asked. Unknown, Admiral Tarvek said after studying the tactical data. Human military technology appears to be centuries ahead of our own. Their ship designs incorporate principles we do not understand. But the enemy outnumbers them by at least 20 to 1. The truth was becoming clear. Humanity might be able to save themselves, but they could not save the rest of the galaxy. Not alone. The defensive network that had protected everyone for 2 centuries had required the combined resources of human space and the voluntary cooperation of every other species. Now the humans had resources but no cooperation. The rest of the galaxy needed cooperation, but lacked resources. Separated, both would fall to an enemy that had consumed countless galaxies before them. We have to go to Earth, President Morkala said finally. We have to apologize and ask them to forgive us. They may refuse, the Silic representative pointed out. Why should they risk human lives to save people who treated them as inferior? Chancellor Mordoon stood slowly. He was the oldest being in the chamber, and he remembered the early days when humans had first joined the Council. He remembered their eagerness to help, their willingness to take on dangerous jobs that other species avoided, their constant efforts to prove themselves worthy of respect. He also remembered how the Council had responded to those efforts. The dismissive comments, the condescending attitudes, the casual assumption that human contributions were less valuable because they came from the youngest species. They should refuse, he said quietly. We do not deserve their help. But we are going to ask anyway. Because the alternative is the death of everything we have ever loved. The vote was unanimous. A delegation would travel to Earth carrying the formal surrender of the Galactic Council and a plea for humanity's forgiveness. The only question was whether they would arrive before the galaxy burned. 2 years after the silent retreat, Ambassador Zeftai led a desperate diplomatic mission through the heavily defended approaches to Earth. The fleet of 6 vessels carried the formal surrender documents of every major species in the galaxy, but Zeftai wondered if they would survive long enough to deliver them. Human space had become unrecognizable. Where once there had been peaceful colonies and research stations, now massive orbital fortresses blocked every approach route. Weapon platforms the size of small moons tracked their movement with targeting sensors that made Zeftai's skin crawl. The automated defense systems that challenged them used technology far beyond anything in galactic databases. Unidentified vessels, you are entering restricted space, came the broadcast on all frequencies. State your purpose. This is Ambassador Zeftai of the Galactic Council, he replied. We carry urgent diplomatic communications for the Terran government. There was a long pause before the response came. Ambassador Zeftai, your vessel has been identified. You are cleared to proceed to Luna Station. Be aware that any deviation from the provided flight path will result in immediate destruction. The flight path took them past installations that defied belief. Shipyards stretched for thousands of kilometers, producing vessels whose designs incorporated principles that seemed to violate known physics. Manufacturing platforms converted raw asteroids into finished warships faster than should have been possible. Most disturbing of all, every human they glimpsed during the journey appeared to have been enhanced far beyond baseline human capabilities. Luna Station itself was a marvel of military engineering. The ancient moon had been hollowed out and converted into the largest fortress HFY had ever seen. Defense grids bristled from every surface. Launch bays large enough to house entire fleets, carved deep into the lunar rock. This was not the infrastructure of a peaceful civilization. This was the war machine of a species that had prepared for total conflict. The reception chamber where they were taken was both impressive and intimidating. The walls displayed real-time tactical information showing the positions of Devourer fleets, human defensive formations, and casualty reports from Outer Rim systems. The scale of the coordination involved suggested a military organization operating at levels far beyond anything the Council had imagined possible. Admiral Chen Wei-lin entered the chamber flanked by officers whose augmented bodies moved with inhuman precision. The Admiral herself appeared to be in her 50s, but her eyes carried the weight of decades spent preparing for this war. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried an authority that made every Council representative unconsciously straighten. "Ambassador HFY," Admiral Chen said. "I remember you from the trade negotiations 18 months ago. You were one of the few Council members who treated our representatives with basic courtesy." "Admiral Chen," HFY replied, offering the formal greeting gesture of respect. "We come bearing the surrender documents of the Galactic Council and a plea for humanity's assistance in defending our shared galaxy." "Shared galaxy?" Admiral Chen's eyebrow raised slightly. "Is that how you see it now?" "Interesting how perspectives change when survival is at stake." Chancellor Mordoon stepped forward. Despite his age and dignity, he performed the complete prostration ritual, lowering himself to the floor in the ultimate gesture of submission. "Humanity was right about everything," he said clearly. "We were wrong about everything. We treated you as servants when you were guardians. We mocked your warnings when they were prophecies. We dismissed your contributions when they were the foundation of our civilization." Admiral Chen studied the elderly Corvani leader. "Rise, Chancellor. Prostration is not necessary. We are not interested in humiliation." "What are you interested in?" President Morkala asked. "Survival," Admiral Chen replied simply. She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's current tactical situation. Red markers indicated Devourer positions. Blue markers showed human fleet formations. The few green markers representing functional galactic government forces looked pathetically small by comparison. "The Devourers have already consumed 47 star systems," Admiral Chen reported. "Our intelligence suggests they will have converted those systems into approximately 900 combat vessels within 3 months. Their total force estimate is now 25 capital harvesters and 8,000 support ships. What can humanity field against them?" Admiral Tarvek asked. Admiral Chen manipulated the display to show human force compositions. The Terran Defense Force currently operates 400 capital ships and approximately 2,000 escort vessels. We also have extensive fixed defenses and can produce replacement vessels at a rate of 50 ships per month. The numbers were sobering. Even with their advanced technology, humans were outnumbered by more than 3 to 1. The Council representatives began to understand why humanity had withdrawn to prepare, rather than attempting to defend the entire galaxy. "However," Admiral Chen continued, "our analysis indicates that a purely defensive strategy will fail eventually. The Devourers can produce ships faster than we can destroy them. Victory requires coordinated offensive action against their primary construction facilities." "What kind of coordination?" HFY asked. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. "The kind we should have had 2 centuries ago. Humans provide the military leadership and advanced technology. Other species provide the industrial capacity and personnel that we lack, a true partnership based on each species contributing their actual strengths." "You want us to acknowledge human military superiority?" Chancellor Mordoon said. "No," Admiral Chen replied. "I want you to acknowledge reality. Human military doctrine and technology are optimized for this specific threat, because we have been fighting versions of this enemy for 200 years. Your industrial capacity and population numbers are resources we cannot match. Neither of us can win alone." President Morkala leaned forward. "What are your terms?" Admiral Chen's response was direct and non-negotiable. "Full operational command of all anti-Devourer military operations. Integration of all species fleets under human tactical doctrine. Complete access to galactic industrial resources for warship production. and formal acknowledgement that humanity's previous contributions to galactic security were essential rather than peripheral. In other words, the Silic representative said bitterly, "You want us to admit that we were always dependent on you." "You were always dependent on us," Admiral Chen replied without emotion. "The question is whether you can accept that reality quickly enough to survive the next year." The council representatives withdrew to deliberate. The debate was brief and one-sided. 12 star systems had fallen just during their journey to Earth. Pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. "We accept your terms," Chancellor Mordun announced upon their return. "Humanity has operational command of all galactic defense operations." Admiral Chen nodded and immediately began issuing orders to her staff. "Signal all human fleets to begin convergence on Rally Point Theta. Contact Corvani shipyards and begin immediate production of Hunter-class vessels using human specifications. Redirect Veltar cargo fleets to begin transporting military supplies to forward bases. Silic bioengineering facilities will begin producing enhanced life support systems for extended combat operations." The transformation was immediate and staggering. Within hours, the chaotic collection of failing governments became a coordinated war machine. Human officers arrived at every major industrial center, bringing plans for converting civilian infrastructure to military production. Alien engineers worked alongside human designers to adapt advanced technology for mass production using available resources. The first joint engagement came 3 weeks later. A combined human-alien fleet intercepted a devourer harvester that was consuming the Rigel system. Zeftai, serving as a liaison officer aboard the human flagship Times, Determination, **, watched in awe as the combined fleet demonstrated what cooperation could achieve. Human warships were technological marvels. Their stealth systems made them nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Their weapons could penetrate devourer shields that had previously been impenetrable. Their coordination allowed them to strike precisely at critical system nodes. But it was the alien support vessels that made victory possible. Corvani shield ships protected the human attackers from return fire. Veltar logistics vessels kept the fleet supplied during extended combat. Silic engineering ships provided rapid field repairs that allowed damaged vessels to continue fighting. The Devourer harvester, which had previously seemed invincible, was destroyed within 6 hours. For the first time since the invasion began, a star system was saved rather than consumed. "How long can we keep this up?" Zeftai asked Admiral Chen as they watched the enemy wreckage burn. "Long enough," she replied. "The Devourers are powerful, but they have one critical weakness. They have never faced organized resistance from a united galaxy. They are used to consuming civilizations that fight separately and fall one by one. And now," Admiral Chen gestured toward the mixed fleet of human and alien vessels. Ships that would never have worked together 18 months ago now operated as a single coordinated force. Now they face something they have never encountered before, a galaxy that finally learned to fight as one. The war was far from over. More Devourer fleets were approaching. The enemy would adapt to their tactics. Millions more beings would die before the threat was eliminated. But for the first time since the invasion began, victory seemed possible. As the joint fleet prepared for the next engagement, Admiral Chen's final transmission to the Council was simple. "The watch resumes, but this time, we do it as equals." The galaxy had learned a painful lesson about the cost of pride. The humans had learned that even guardians sometimes need support. Together, they faced the future as true partners, forged in the crucible of near extinction. The galaxy that emerged from the Devourer War would be very different from the one that had existed before, but it would survive, and it would remember the quiet guardians who had always been protecting them, even when they were too proud to notice.